strengthen the core to expand client relevance. There's a certain interpretation that I have to this topic, and I think I'm going to impose a part of my interpretation on the audience and perhaps my guests right here. Can I please have on stage Rishad Premji, Salil Parekh, and Varun Berry, please? How are businesses thinking of client relevance in an era of disruption? How can companies keep their core strengthened, which is culture, which is principles, and yet innovate and expand their relevance to clients? That's my interpretation of this. And the first question, and let's go across the table, so to say. Salil, traditionally, businesses like to see markets in terms of segments, and that is how they have been served. I don't know how happy NASSCOM is going to be with you taking out their mascot, but we'll give it to you. It goes right back. Traditionally, businesses have looked at markets as segments, and that's how they have been served so far. Processes have evolved like that, a lot of assumptions made. The creation around delivery has been that. The question is, with the disruption that one is seeing and the kind of innovation that's coming in, has the line blurred on who is the client? Who are you serving? And how do you identify that?
So first, thank you for having me here. I think the topic, as you've interpreted it, really is the way I've certainly read it. There's a huge change in the way large enterprises are viewing the business environment. And in that change, because of all the new digital technologies, there's an ability to make impact which is far greater today than it was in the past. Yes, they are viewing their own clients or customers in different ways. And why are they doing that? There are 5 broad themes that are helping them to do it. There's a theme around how experience is driven for their own customers that makes the change more relevant, how people use the technology. There's a whole theme on data, and because large enterprises can access and use data in different ways, they're able to make that change. And there are other themes, for example, on cloud, on IoT, on security, which are making these changes available. So in today's world, the way really to strengthen the core is to make these digital changes, these disruptions, more and more relevant to these enterprises and also public sector entities. And those changes become relevant for their client base. So in fact, my view is there's a huge set of opportunities that this throws up. Of course, most relevantly for our segment, our sector, but also for other sectors, because with this change, you see a need for all of the technology to become center in what enterprises are doing.
Before I go to Varun, Rishad, I'll come to you. Like I started off by saying, and Salil's kind of qualified it, that things are changing, and it's no longer a segment that you're serving or a segment that the product goes to. And technology has unbundled those segments to a great extent, which is why processes are not working. I mean, how are you going to qualify companies like an Uber or an Amazon today? And the question is, and I go back to the first question, how do corporations figure out who your client is?
Look, Supriya, I don't think fundamentally customers have changed, right? And I don't think the expectations that customers have either have changed. All customers still want quality, they want service, they want responsiveness, they want functioning products. I think what has dramatically changed is access to those customers, right? And with mobile penetration and data, there are young, digitally native, AI-born companies that can then access those customers. And so what's fundamentally changing is enterprises who historically had control on those customers are now having to very fundamentally how they address those customers. And if you think about historically, I would submit many enterprises actually didn't organize themselves from the perspective of the consumer or their customer. They oftentimes organize themselves from the perspective of the organization or the enterprise. So if I think about a bank, nobody thought about an account opening process without somebody having to walk into a branch or deal with the teller. Or if I thought about hospitality, digitally checking in. Or if I thought about a pharma company thinking about life beyond the pill. And so what it's fundamentally forcing these enterprises to do is to reorganize themselves in a very human-centric manner with the customer at the center of it. And that's a profound change for a bank. And for me, that is, in many ways, the digital change. And I think what it's causing them to then do is expect a lot from their partners. Partners like companies like us and Infosys in terms of how we can provide an integrated stitch solution to address that. that need. And then we have expectations of our partners and a network of our partners to actually deliver that. So that's one change in terms of technology and how it's disrupting how you address your client. But I also want to share a perspective which is the other side, which is from the consumer product side business, which Varun also comes from, right? A lot of us think with e-commerce coming in and India being relatively in the consumer product space, a low e-commerce penetration business, we think we will go from general trade, which is the Kirana stores, perhaps skip the modern trade and go to e-commerce. And funnily, I find actually that despite the fact that that would make logical sense, the Kirana stores actually are functioning. You know, they provide access to credit, they provide service, they provide proximity, and so they're staying relevant to their customers. And interestingly, I find that they're now expanding their business model by leveraging the e-commerce business, because what they're saying to themselves is, the e-commerce guys can use me as a pit stop for where they can now deliver their stuff to their end consumer, and oh, by the way, also use that as a mechanism to cross-sell and upsell to their end consumer. So it's a dichotomy of the old world surviving while technology disrupting the new world in some ways.
You're in some sense tempting me to my next question for Varun. And Varun, I think one of the things that Rishad perhaps puts in the right perspective is that you've got to straddle through two words. One is extremely brick and mortar that continues to survive. And then there is this disruptive e-commerce word. I'm just taking a very narrow definition, and which is where your customers are. So how do you straddle both words and still continue to be relevant?
Right. So I'm in a very simple business. We make food and fill people's stomachs. So basically, it's a simple business. You've just got to get the right products at the right price. So what are the filters that we go through? First of all, any new product that we launch has to be far enough for the consumer to be excited, but close enough for them to be able to, purchase it, right? Second is it's got to be a part of their daily ritual, right? It cannot be very far away from my daily ritual because that vitiates the relationship with the consumer. And third is, the Indian consumer will never change. The Indian consumer is value conscious and they're always steeped into this pragmatism of it has to be at the right price, right? So those are the filters that we look at. But, if you were to look at, so that doesn't change, right? So that remains constant. It has been and will remain constant for many, many years as we go forward. What is changing in India? Now, from our industry perspective, there are two things which are changing. If you look at the demographics, clearly, if you look at the rural part of India, that's growing at least 500 basis points faster than what the urban part of India is growing at, right? So that's one thing that is changing pretty dramatically. Second is, India is a very young population, and the youth today has very different aspirations from what we had in our generation. The youth are much more flirtatious with the products that they consume. So the repertoire of a young consumer is much wider than what it used to be, for an older consumer, right? So older consumer would probably have 2 brands in their repertoire through the month. Now that's going to 8 and 10 and 12, right? So consumers are spoiled for choices. They're looking for new products to consume all the time. That makes a big difference to what we do, and hence it requires innovation. And innovation without the right kind of insights is probably, the best thing not to do, right? So with technology, with all the digital media that we have, with the listening that we do to consumers, with the research that we do, we sell billions of packets of biscuits every day. So for us to do one-off research is not the right thing to do. We've got consumer panels which operate on a daily basis, synthesizing and making sure that you get the right information and not the noise from them is very important. The distribution models are changing, as Rishad was saying, while the Kirana store is surviving. But the fact is that India is probably the only market where modern trade hasn't become, a large part of the total business. And the reason is that the Indian distributor is the first Uber, so to say. They've been distributors for hundreds of years, and they've been distributors for multiple companies at the same time. And they know their, customers intimately. They know their markets intimately. And because of that, because of our partnership with these distributors, we get to 5.2 million outlets in this country, which is larger than the population of many countries, you know, in and around where we are at. Right. So I think it's very important to take all those points into play as we start to write what is in the future for us.
No, I agree with you, and you were tempting me to go to innovation next, but I will stick to my questions, and I will ask you, Salil, a question on disruption. And disruption is, you know, strengthening the core at a time of cutting-edge technology, causing disruption, and disruption also being caused by other factors, you know, whether it's regulation, whether it's geopolitical issues and all of that. As a CEO, how do you choose which disruption do you need to prioritize to deal with?
So there are two elements to that, that answer from me. One is, you know, there are disruptions that our clients are facing. And for us, that's critical to understand, given the large set of incumbents we work with, how those disruptions are affecting those sectors. And then with our own business, there is disruption coming, and disruptions coming typically in faster ways through the gig economy. It's coming through AI toolkits that are disrupting how our business works, and it's coming through products that many times take certain elements of services into play. So the way to answer your question, to address those, is usually the disruption that you've not thought about is the one that gets to you. And the only way to be aware of these things is really a little bit of experimentation on a regular basis to see where things are going. When you're a large enterprise, you can see some of these disruptions coming, and today it's fairly common to talk about various trends in that market. But if you think about 5G and how that's going to disrupt whole sets of industries, that's the next disruption that's on our horizon. Uberization and Amazonization is behind us, meaning people understand how that disruption works today. But the 5G disruption, as one example, is going to change so many different industries because of the scale of impact that it could have. Within our business, the gig economy or way of approaching is essentially because the millennials have a different way of looking at how services businesses work. And for that, it's more understanding the nature of how millennials want to work as opposed to how our business is disrupted. So different ways to looking at it, fewer things, and experiment a little bit.
Salil, to you then, you know, startups are used to pivoting rapidly. Large organizations are not. And then the whole issue about how do you balance the culture. You know, there is an Infosys way of doing things, and there is an innovator's way of doing things. How do you marry the two? Is that a challenging task as a
First,
CEO?
I'll just make a small correction. The Infosys way is the innovative way of doing things.
Okay.
It will be clear. But I think...
I can identify the Infosys right here, but go ahead.
No, I think my bias is more with the incumbents, which is a bit unusual. And the reason is, if you have a well-established incumbent of history, and they have agility within them, the points that Varun was just making, you have an incredible advantage in the market because you have such client trust, you have such ability to make an impact on a broad platform. But the key to that is this agility. And I think to build that into a business is extremely tricky. And I won't speak to my company, but in general, I think the idea there is always to be open to where the change is coming from. Because that allows you to at least be aware that something is going to come and disrupt you. So, and the startup culture is a great culture, but to achieve scale, as we know in most businesses, takes such a long time. I think in our earlier discussion, we were talking about the probability of a startup making it through to the end. It's 1 in 1,000, maybe 1 in 10,000. So if you can use the benefit of incumbency with agility, you have a really powerful combination.
Rishad, you want to add to that? And also the part, is this digital era giving incumbents the chance to strike back? And is that the sort of evolution that we are going to see?
I would say slightly differently, Supriya, that I think the digital era is forcing large incumbents to disrupt themselves to survive, because otherwise somebody else is going to eat their lunch, right? But I think you can, I don't think there's a dichotomy between the innovators' way versus the large enterprises' way. I think you can create that inside of the organization, and you've got to find safe spaces in which you can do it, and you've got to break protocol and break processes and find ways in which you substantiate that. So for example, if you're trying to tell the organization that learn fast and fail fast and it's okay to fail, then you cannot diss that person, and we were talking about this earlier, in an appraisal if they haven't done well, or they have a limit to their career because they failed, or they've taken a chance where somebody else would not. You know, you can, how do you break certain processes, whether they be recruiting processes or compensation processes inside of the organization where you want to drive different ideas. So that's one approach. The other is you can also extend this innovation to outside of the organization and how you bring it in, right? How can you work with young startups who are real startups outside of the organization? How can you work with other stakeholders, whether they be expert networks or crowdsourcing platforms? Salil talked about the gig economy. So how do you bring some of those capabilities that are sitting outside of the organization, but very integral to the way you innovate as well, and tightly coupling it together?
No, fair point. I'll take a quick last question to Varun, and I had promised I'm going to open it to the audience for at least 15 minutes. I've got 17 on the clock, so just 2 more minutes, and then I open it to the audience. And Varun, a lot of companies are moving beyond traditional segmenting of consumers. We've kind of established that on this panel here. They're using sophisticated tools, psychographic data, which is gathered both online and offline. I'm going to ask you a little bit of a tricky question here. Data is being mapped, tracked, and all of this. How does one take care of this while privacy remains a concern? Or do you believe privacy in the age of smartphones is a mere myth?
No. So we haven't gotten to that stage where we, micromanage data to that extent. We are still, broad-basing our data, basis conventional demographics, psychographics. So we are not in that stage of, getting to the details of. So I think it's, you're right. At some stage, we will have to get to that level. But there is no, as far as data privacy is concerned, it's something that, we are completely committed to. We are never going to breach that. But having said that, there's so much data available today. If you were to segment Bangalore city and say that you wanted to get to housewives who are 30 to 32 years old with a child who's 5 years old, etc., you can get to that, right? In terms of reach through all the digital media. So I think there is an opportunity, but the opportunity is more from a startup perspective than for a company like us, which is a lot more broad-based. So we've got universal appeal. We get to slightly broader categories of customers and consumers. We do not, target it so finely, especially for our main products. But at some stage, as we build this startup culture within the organization and we start to do these smaller projects and specialized projects and, organic products and, all of that, as we start to build the top of the pyramid, which might be very small today, but as we start to build it and build it to be much larger than what it is today, I think that'll come in very, very handy.
Thank you very much, Rishad, Salil, and Varun, for being with us on this fascinating discussion. Strengthening the core to expand client relevance is perhaps challenging, but as it has been established, not entirely impossible.